Okay, our meeting is being recorded. So we have new officers for the first time. So we have Amy, who is our new chair, and Erin, who is the co-chair, and Claudia, who is the secretary. So this will be our first meeting with our new officers. So welcome, everybody. And Amy, I will turn it over to you to call the meeting to order and do the welcome and the opening and the agenda review. You're on mute, Amy.
Can y'all hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. It says it's having trouble with my audio. I am Amy Litzinger, and I am excited to welcome you to today's meeting. We have in the room with us our co-chair, Erin Banger is also here, and we have a very busy agenda today. But I'm hoping that everyone will contribute and we will have an enjoyable meeting. So our agenda today includes our welcome and opening, our agenda review, and our meeting guidelines. Then we have TEA staff is going to give us legislative updates, and we're going to talk about digital curriculum and the teacher vacancy task force update. And then I will give us our legislative report, which is updates on our recommendations and proposed bills. And then hopefully we'll have some public comments. And public comments, you have to notify us by 9:30 a.m. So we still have some time.
Okay, thanks, Amy. So can you officially call the meeting to order?
And I will turn it over to Ms. Stephanie Cope to do our meeting guidelines.
Okay, thank you. Everybody get a copy of the agenda. So up at the top is where that we see the CAC members' duties, and there's 6 items there. So just to remind you that you are charged with advising TEA unmet needs with the state and with the education of children with disabilities. You comment publicly on any rules or regulations proposed by the state regarding the education of children with disabilities. You advise TEA in developing evaluations and reporting on data to the secretary under section 618 of the Act. You advise TEA in developing corrective action plans to address findings identified in federal monitoring reports under Part B of the Act. You advise TEA in developing and implementing policies relating to the coordination of services for children with disabilities. And you advise TEA in setting standards related to significant disproportionality determination. So really, that's just the duties that you guys are charged with. For the meeting, we're going to follow the agenda, and I would ask that you guys allow TEA staff to go first, if you wouldn't mind. So we have Kristen McGuire here, and Kristen is the Senior Director of Special Education Policy Programs and Reporting, and she's here to give us a legislative update. So if, with your permission, I would ask that we allow Kristen to go next. Is that okay with you, Amy? Yeah, okay, perfect. Okay, Kristen, we'll turn it over to you. Welcome.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, everybody. Hope everybody had a nice weekend. Getting back to work this morning. So yeah, as Stephanie mentioned, and on your agenda, I'm going to do a quick legislative update. Part of that, of course, is all embedded within our, data in Texas. So I did want to share just a little bit. Many of you have seen seen these slides before as far as data, but we'll do that and then go into some legislative updates as well. Let me make sure that I am working here. Did just want to go ahead and update you if you haven't seen the 2022-2023 data related to special education that as of the October 2022 snapshot data that we gather through PEAMS, we are at 12.8% of the overall student population who have been identified as receiving special education services. So quite a bit of a jump. You'll see obviously through the span of years here, but even especially over a 1% jump within one school year. This is the same information just seen through some raw numbers here. You can see almost a 70,000 increase just between 21-22 and 22-23. So lots of growth happening, obviously in desperate need of staff, as you all have talked about at length, but we are definitely increasing the population. And of course, my dog comes in with the loudest squeaky toy on the planet, which never fails. All right, so just looking at just kind of the overall student growth of the state, which is in blue there. There was a less than a 2% increase between the last school year and this one we just finished up. There was almost a 10% increase in the numbers of students identified for special education services. So again, just another way of looking at those visuals and that data. Initial evaluations for special education continuing to rise minus the COVID year, but obviously continuing to rise. And we expect when we do get numbers this summer for this school year that it will be even higher, as all of our school district representatives can attest to, I'm sure. Data related to the most prevalent disabilities that are identified. Learning disabilities, of course, still remain the most highly identified, followed by speech and language impairment, and autism and other health impairment switched from the last 2 years in terms of most identified. I know many of you are interested in specifically the identification of dyslexia, and we'll talk about a bill that passed that addresses dyslexia. This is just another look at numbers of students identified and how they're served. You can see that students identified with dyslexia who are served through special education is increasing, in addition, of course, to the overall identification of students with dyslexia. All right, so let me go through, and I know Amy's going to go through your legislative report in particular to identify any bills that address any of those issues. Do just want to, of course, oh, Aaron, go ahead. I'm sorry. Did you have a question?
I did. Thanks, Kristen.
Sure.
I saw you had data there on section 504. Is that just for students with dyslexia, or are you collecting 504 data for any disability?
We do collect 504 data as a whole, but this slide is specifically about dyslexia identification.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right, and so legislative update, do just want to preface that the governor has until June 18th to sign bills into law, or veto bills, or let them become law, let bills become law without a signature. So we're still in a holding pattern unless the governor's already signed a particular bill. And so I just want to preface that by, when we talk about these, they are all conditional and contingent on being signed or being allowed to go into effect without a signature. So this is probably the largest bill that affects, I think, day-to-day operations within school districts related to, again, the identification of dyslexia. This is House Bill 3928. So there are kind of several pieces of this. I think these are probably the three largest pieces that affect school districts overall and sort of statewide evaluation and identification. So one of the pieces of this particular bill does direct the State Board of Education to make some changes to their rules and to their dyslexia handbook. So again, we don't quite know the timeline of when that will be. The State Board does have until June, the end of June of 2024, to make this particular change that's up here in the first bullet. So this first bullet directs the State Board to remove any reference to standard protocol dyslexia instruction. So you might remember in the current handbook, we have a term or a type of instruction that's called standard protocol that is listed as far as kind of what that definition is. And this particular bill directs them to take that out and not differentiate it between any other type of dyslexia instruction. That was a state coined term, so it isn't a kind of standard commonly used term. So it does direct them to not separate the types of dyslexia instruction. The other piece of that is it does require someone with specific knowledge of dyslexia, the reading process, and dyslexia instruction on the multidisciplinary evaluation team and the ARD committee. So essentially those teams that are looking at data to determine whether a student should be evaluated, as well as any ARD committee that comes from that to determine eligibility, needs someone with knowledge, specific knowledge of dyslexia, the reading process, and dyslexia instruction. Currently, the handbook advises that, but it's not a requirement. Now, this is the other piece where the State Board is going to be involved, is because it does have a list of who those people are. The first one is a licensed dyslexia therapist. The second would be someone with kind of the highest credential of dyslexia instruction or intervention, which is typically what we refer to as certified academic language therapists. But in the bill itself, it does say that it needs to be an association recognized by the State Board of Education. So the State Board is going to need to define, what that second person could be. And then the third person on that list, as far as who could serve as that representative, is someone with specific training, obviously within these in these areas, and that is going to be determined also by the State Board. So we will have some lag time between the effective date of this law and when the State Board makes the determinations of who those individuals are. So we will kind of have to navigate what that looks like until the State Board makes those decisions. The third, I think, biggest piece of this particular bill is that it does require the agency, TEA, to develop a notice, kind of like a form to be given to parents when dyslexia is suspected, that identifies some rights under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act for parents that may be additional to those parental rights that are provided under Section 504. So that is something obviously that we are already working on to try and get to the field as soon as possible. But that will be something that districts will need to give parents when dyslexia is suspected. All right, House Bill 1225. This is a bill that allows a parent, guardian, or teacher to request that a student be administered a STAR assessment on paper rather than online. So as you might remember, we are almost fully in transition to full online state assessment administrations. This particular legislature, after hearing from parents, decided that they will allow a certain percentage of students to be administered the paper assessment if that is requested. So essentially, this bill lays out some deadlines by which a parent or teacher would have to request the paper administration, but the number of students who are administered a paper assessment cannot exceed 3% of the total student enrollment in the district. So essentially, if I'm a parent and I submit my request by the deadline, but the district has already met their 3%, then I would be told no, because they're going to accept the requests in the order they were received. Now, there is a caveat to that 3% does not apply if a student ARD committee determines that the administration of a paper assessment is necessary as a modification for the student. So basically, if they've already reached the 3% and an ARD committee determines, no, this student needs a modification that's only provided in paper, this student needs that, then that's an exception to that 3%. House Bill 1416, many of you are familiar with sort of the infamous bill that will always be infamous, HB 4545. Districts had a lot of difficulty implementing this particular statute last year, or for the last 2 years. This was a bill that required certain elements and kind of prescribed the elements of accelerated and what they called supplemental instruction to students who did not meet satisfactory performance on STAR assessments. And so based on the implementation struggles, there is this bill that was passed, House Bill 1416, to try and remove some of those barriers in implementation. And so within House Bill 1416, it still does require accelerated and supplemental instruction for all subject areas. So if a student did not meet satisfactory performance in reading, math, science, social studies, depending on what grade level they're in, as well as the end of course exams, accelerated and supplemental is still required. But if a particular student did not meet satisfactory performance in more than 2 subjects per year, the district must prioritize reading and math. And so those are the highest prioritized subject areas. So that prescription of kind of what supplemental instruction is, that was modified. It was 30 hours. It was modified to 15 hours. But if a student scored significantly below the satisfactory level, it will remain at 30 hours. Now, that significantly below satisfactory level is going to be determined by the commissioner rule. So that we'll have to wait on. The tutor to student ratio. So we did have a 1 adult to 3 students requirement unless a parent consented to a larger group. That's been increased from to 1 to 4, again, unless a parent consents to a larger group. One of the provisions in the statute prior to 1416 was that ARD committees had to meet to determine the student's path, through accelerated instruction. That was obviously pretty difficult in terms of because they were serving as that accelerated learning committee. It's very difficult to do if you get test scores right at the end of the school year and you're trying to get accelerated instruction going during the summer. So there is no formal requirement for ARD committees to meet anymore to determine that. So essentially students with IEPs will follow the same process through this accelerated instruction as any other student, unless of course a member of the ARD committee wants to schedule a meeting and feels like the IEP needs to be modified because of this requirement. And then finally, they did add a kind of a parental modification component. So a parent can choose to modify or remove any piece of that prescribed supplemental instruction. So those are the largest pieces of that one. House Bill 1926, SSES, that's the Supplemental Special Education Services Program. That was put into statute last session. This is the $1,500 grant that is offered once in a child's educational career for a student who receives special education services. So that is essentially a grant that a parent is able to access services or equipment through the established marketplace to draw down that $1,500. That particular statute was set to expire September 1st of 2024. This particular bill removes that expiration date. It also removes a limitation in the statute that limited it to 30 million per year. And so what that means is that it will just be subject to whatever the legislature puts in the appropriations bill, so the state budget. Currently, what the budget has in there is a little over 63 million for the first year of this upcoming biennium. And that is to help address the wait list that has occurred. And the second year would be 30 million. So that's the way the budget shapes up currently. Senate Bill 133 is not directly related to special education, but it does affect our restraint, the agency's restraint and timeout rules associated with students with disabilities who receive special education services. But this particular bill prohibits peace officers or security personnel from restraining or using a chemical irritant or a taser on any student in grade 5 or below, unless the student poses a serious risk of harm to themselves or another person. I put these three all together. They are related. Many of you who follow the Governor's Committee for People with Disabilities, you will find this familiar. This was one of their charges, was the Driving with Disability program, in which an individual can essentially voluntarily indicate that they have some kind of disability or impairment that may impede effective communication with a peace officer, to have that designation be put on their license or personal identification certificate. So this particular bill, Senate Bill 656, actually sort of puts more emphasis on the right to do that. Even though we've had the program, this is actually making it statute. Senate Bill 2304 goes a step further in that it will require school districts to distribute information about this program in ARD meetings and in Section 504 meetings once the child is 16 and annually thereafter. And then House Bill 3132 is just a separate bill that was passed that is the same type of information, but it is specific to if an individual is deaf or hard of hearing, they can get that designation put on their license or identification. Just a heads up for this is House Bill 729 does establish a statewide intellectual and developmental disability coordinating council, excuse me. TEA will be a member of that council, so we'll share information about that at a later date. And then Senate Bill 55 does require the Higher Education Coordinating Board to conduct a study to determine best practices for assisting students with autism spectrum disorder. And so we will be involved to the extent that they ask us data information as far as students who graduate from Texas schools, as well as there's a provision in the bill for them to work with the agency to determine if there are effective practices within the secondary school system that would help in post-secondary. Again, another heads up, October 17th, Entrepreneurs with Disabilities Day. So that day will be recognized with various events. So you might want to mark that on your calendars. And House Bill 3 is really a large omnibus school safety and security bill. So there's two pieces that directly pertain to students with disabilities. One is that TEA has to develop guidelines for emergency situations for districts to include in their emergency operations plans on how to ensure safety of students and staff with disabilities. And then they did add within the school safety allotment provision in statute, as far as allowable uses of that allotment, they can be used, or it can be used for video and audio equipment for special education classrooms under 29.022, the self-contained classrooms. So that was a mouthful. Any questions or comments that you would like me to address for you or get back to you on?
I do not see anything in chat, Kristen.
I have
All
a
right.
question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Could you, it was the Senate bill for the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board about the study for individuals with autism in post-secondary?
That was Senate Bill 55.
Okay, and do you have any additional information on that or,
I don't. I can put the link to the bill in the chat just so you have it and you can read through it. It does have some specifics about like what the study has to address. But yeah, I can put the link to that. But as far as any knowledge about how they're going to implement it, I don't yet.
okay, great, thank you.
Sure.
And what was it that you went over after Senate Bill 55 and before House Bill 3?
It was, hold on, let me go back. That was Senate Bill 464. So that's designating October 17th as Entrepreneurs with Disabilities Day. And I can share this slide deck with Stephanie too, just so if you guys want it, just so you have reference.
Thank you. That would be appreciated.
Sure. And let me put just the main TLO link too. So that second one I posted there is just where you can go and you can put the bill numbers in there if you'd like to read through them.
Awesome. Great. Thank you. Anybody
All
else?
right.
Additional questions? Anybody? Nope.
I will just say, as far as just the teacher vacancy task force, since that was on the agenda, of course, they submitted all of their recommendations in February. There were several bills that addressed their recommendation. Unfortunately, nothing got passed as of the end of the regular session. So, of course, we're still in the first special session. We do expect, I would imagine, at least a second one. So it depends on if the governor puts school funding on any special session agenda. So we may end up engaging more in those discussions if he does. In addition to that, as I'm sure you're aware, there were two main bills that discuss special education funding. A lot of those provisions of those two primary bills ended up getting put into kind of those big omnibus bills on school funding. But again, those didn't pass at the end of the regular session. So again, may still be a conversation if school funding ends up being a special session topic, but we will keep you updated.
Thank you for that. We actually have Kayla that's going to be talking to us from the Director of Teacher Perspectives and Staffing in just a second. But
oh, yay, good. Okay.
Yeah. So she could expound on that a little bit. But thanks so much, Kristen. We appreciate your time in the PowerPoint. That was great. If you can send me the deck, then I can send it to everybody.
Absolutely. Perfect. All right. Y'all take care.
Okay. Thank you. Before we move on to Kayla, just wanted to mention that the time for public comments, people have to make their request known between 9 and 9:30. It's almost 9:30. And just to let you know, Amy, I checked the CAC email and nobody has emailed me. So I don't know if you guys have anybody in the room there with you that is requesting public comments. But if not, then we won't have any today if there's nobody that has made their request known to you.
No one has private messaged me, so.
Okay, so that means we probably won't have any public comments because now it is 9:30, so we're out of time. Just one note, the next thing on the agenda was a digital curriculum committee report update, but just to let you guys know that this no longer lives with TEA, it lives with the Office of the Governor. So any request or for information with that, if you could contact the governor's office, they would be able to provide you assistance with that. And specifically, the point of contact would be Ron Lucy. So we're going to table that item because it's no longer a TEA item. And then next up on our agenda, we are very fortunate to have Kayla with us today, and she is the Director of Teacher Perspectives and Staffing. And I'm not going to even attempt to say your last name because I'm going to mess it up. So if you could please say it for me, I'd appreciate it, Kayla.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I am Kyla Jaramillo, Director of Teacher Perspectives and Staffing, here to provide just a brief update on the Teacher Vacancy Task Force. I had the privilege of speaking with you back in the fall when the task force was just drafting recommendations. As Kristen mentioned, we did see a lot of these recommendations in drafted bill language. but it did not pass. So we will wait and see if anything happens in special session. So I'll go ahead and share my screen. I believe that the report was shared with you in advance of this meeting. And so we'll go ahead and you can find the final report on the website. Again, as sort of mentioned previously, we have three main buckets where the task force had recommendations related to compensation, training and support, and working conditions. I'm not going to, in this presentation, highlight all of these, rather just the ones related to special education. So the first bucket I will highlight is bucket 3, providing incentives and support for hard to staff areas. Here, the task force had 3 main recommendations: subsidizing certification and hiring incentives for special education and bilingual education teachers, creating targeted marketing campaigns and incentives to recruit teachers back into the profession, and collecting and reporting real-time data about teacher vacancies in tandem with the development of a statewide teacher employment web application. The task force also had recommendations related to training and support. One was related to grow your own pathways and teacher residencies, which are noted to, based on the research, really support the hiring and staffing of hard to staff areas. And then the final buckets of recommendations were working conditions related to demonstrating respect and value for teacher time and ensuring school-wide culture and discipline supports. And again, the full recommendations can be found on that website. The task force also developed best practice recommendations for school systems, which can be found in the appendix of the final report. And school systems, administrators, superintendents have had this presentation and have been trained on these best practice recommendations. And so they're broken out by each theme within the final report. And so the first piece was, or the piece I want to highlight is in theme 3, those hard to staff areas. The task force recommended, based on the data and research, recommended that school systems conduct an analysis of employee certifications to identify teachers with bilingual or special education certifications not serving in those settings and provide incentives for teachers to move into those positions. Moving into theme 4, the task force really looked again at hard to staff areas and looked at assessing options for residency preparation programs that serve in their regions and evaluate their capacity for establishing or growing partnerships to engage in strategic staffing efforts. The task force also recommended considering ways to increase access to high school education and training courses, to consider hiring high school graduates as educational aides or paraprofessionals, to eventually hire them as teachers of record. And then we'll go to, again, all of the full suite of recommendations for school systems can be found in the appendix, which you can see. And then these are the TEA supports that align to the task force recommendations: the grow your own supports, Texas strategic staffing, the mentor program allotment, and the teacher incentive allotment. After the task force, TEA did publish resources for school systems, which I have linked on the screen here. Resources for hiring and staffing. And so that was shared with superintendents. And then some additional next steps and actions. There's a critical shortage area certification exam reimbursement opportunity that's been shared with EPPs. So TEA is providing a limited reimbursement opportunity for all educator preparation programs certifying candidates in approved shortage areas for the 2022-2023 academic year, which supports over 10,000 teacher candidates and provides eligible educator preparation programs the opportunity to receive reimbursements that cover the costs of teacher candidates' content certification exams aligned to the critical shortage areas. And then we're also launching a TEA Teacher Leadership Fellowship. We just went through a selection process, and so there are 39 teachers that will be providing feedback to TEA on strategic initiatives and priorities over the course of a year. Included in that cohort of teachers are hard to staff areas, which include special education teachers that will continue to provide input to TEA on the effectiveness of existing programs in alignment with the task force recommendations. And so that is just the brief update that I have related to these recommendations. Again, as Kristen mentioned, we'll keep this group updated on if anything changes related to these recommendations in any of the special sessions.
Thank you so much. Anybody have any questions, comments, follow up? No, I don't think so, Kyla. So thank you for your time. Appreciate you being here this morning.
Thank you so much.
All right, we will move on with our agenda. And the next item is actually you, Amy, with the CAC legislative report updates. And we're ready to hear from you.
All right, well, I tried very hard to find some relevant bills for us, and I need to share my screen. Almost started without you guys being able to see. Okay, so here is our legislative update. For school safety, we have SB 30 by Huffman. Added some appropriations for school safety, and I gave you the number there. HB 3 by Burroughs, appropriations and implementation for public school safety. And it adds panic alert buttons in every classroom. They may use their school safety allotment for that. Tallarico gave us HB 1905. ISDs can use appropriations to offer school safety training to school personnel and child care workers, including active shooter training. SB 1720 call force people who report potential school safety issues to threat assessment teams remain anonymous and their identity is protected. SB 838 Creighton, providing panic buttons to public schools and charter schools. Unfortunately, this next one didn't pass. HB 166 by Gonzalez would have put individualized safety plans in every student who's determined to need one in their IEP. So data privacy, HB 18 by Slauson, protects a minor's data from online service providers to prevent algorithms designed to promote tech addiction, also applicable in devices used by public schools and charter schools. HB 4944 by Buckley, develop cybersecurity controls to prevent cyber attacks on TEA. TEA and the Department of Information Resources are to provide technical assistance to ISDs and charter schools regarding requirements on networks, as well as perform cybersecurity risk assessments. SB 2105 by Johnson puts regulations on data brokers to protect data of consumers, especially those who are part of vulnerable populations. SB 1474 by Betancourt formally submits the recommendations of the Special Education Funding Commission to the legislature. The recommendation matched many of advocates' opinions, such as an intensity-based system rather than setting-based funding, low-cost initial evaluations, continued funding for SSES, etc. HB 2126 by Goodwin. Public school districts and charter schools to include the use of disciplinary measures and restraints in their PIEMS reports, disaggregated by race, ethnicity, gender, and status, and requiring districts and charter schools to annually provide related information to parents and guardians. Digital literacy and accessibility. HB 2177 by Stuckey establishes a digital curriculum pilot program and includes accessibility for students with disabilities. Staff qualifications. SB 1474 covers funding for staff certifications exam and rehire penalties. Also suggests salary stipends for special education teachers and paraprofessionals. When it comes to full and initial evaluations, SB 1474 also recommends a cost offset for full and initial evaluations. Teacher certification and educator preparation curriculum. SB 1474 suggests a grow your own program for teachers interested in serving students receiving special education. Transition graduation requirements. HB 5146 by Rainey establishes the Building Better Futures program for students with intellectual and developmental disabilities. SB 1225 by Zaffarini. Students have the right to a supported decision-making agreement or an educational representative as an alternative to guardianship and transition IEPs. Impartial hearing officers. HB 2125 by Busey. Training for hearing officers about special education and students with disabilities. Person-centered planning. Individual IEPs exist, but do not use person-centered thinking yet. I know that was a lot of information in a very short period of time. So does anybody have any questions?
Amy, these were the ones you presented were all passed.
Except for the one that I starred.
I was just going to say thank you for pulling it together in a little concise way. That was very helpful.
And if you'll remember, I broke them out in the categories of our recommendations so that you could see whether our recommendations actually got anywhere.
Can that go out in an email?
Yes, and the one that I send in an email, I will put the links to the statutes for you.
Awesome, thank you.
So Amy, will you send that to me and then I can just email it out to everybody?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Anybody else before we move on to our next agenda item? Nope. Okay. Well, the next item is to review and approve the September 2022 meeting minutes. The problem with that is that we still don't have the minutes to review. Unfortunately, we have not been able to get that. So I think that we need to start to think outside the box and come up with a different way to get those meeting minutes. One idea that had been discussed at the last meeting was that someone listened to the recording and actually just create those minutes. So is that something that you guys want to have happen? And if so, will we ask our new secretary to do that? Or who do you think is the most appropriate person to do that?
Hey, Stephanie, this is Agatha
Me?
Thibodeau. I don't think that's a bad idea. And I can actually, since I was secretary during that time, but was unable to attend that meeting, I can volunteer to listen to that meeting and take notes.
Awesome.
Doing that.
Thank you so much. That will be super helpful so
Was
that
it-
we can add that to our next agenda,
Was it the September 21st meeting?
22nd. Well, I mean, 2022, it may be September 21st, yes.
I had some notes from the meeting if they're helpful, Agatha, just my personal notes.
That would be amazing. If you could send those to me, or you can send it to Stephanie, and then Stephanie can just send it to me and a link to the meeting. And yeah, I can go ahead and take down those notes since I was secretary at that time, and then we can get them approved for our next meeting.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, everybody. So that'll go on as an agenda item for our next meeting. So next would be to determine and confirm the next CAC meeting date. We already set that date the last time we met. We were just waiting to make sure that there was room available at Region 13, and there is. And I sent you guys an email out, but if you didn't happen to see that email, the next meeting is September 11th from 9 to 2. So that should be on your calendars already, but if not, if you will just make a note of that, that has been confirmed with Region 13 for room availability. All right, and the next item is to discuss, recommend, and take possible action on current meeting minutes and future meeting topics. So Claudia, do you want to review the minutes with us from today?
Hi.
Well, real quick, Stephanie, sorry, I don't mean to, this is Agatha, I don't mean to interrupt, but we might want to talk about future meeting topics before we do the minutes, just in case, that way they can be captured before we approve the minutes.
Oh, makes sense.
Agatha.
Thank you. Makes sense. Thank you, Agatha. Okay, so what do you guys want on your next meeting for topics?
Can we get another update on the special legislation approvals?
Sure. So I can ask Kristen McGuire if she will come back and give us an update, because at that June 18th date will have, of course, passed by then. Anything else?
We probably need some time to work on our recommendations as well. So we get a head start.
we'll probably want to do a comparison of our existing policy recommendations against what passed to see what we do and don't necessarily want to carry forward.
Right.
So is that something that you would do, Amy?
Yeah, I can lead that.
Okay. Okay, perfect. Anything else? Those are 2 items. Is there anybody else from TEA that you would like me to invite to talk with you about any particular topic?
On the special ed funding piece, just any more kind of details on how that actually hashes out.
Okay, so could we include that in the legislative updates, do you think, April? That could be, but I could specifically ask Kristen if she could touch on that.
Yeah, and I know sometimes they bring different people if it's specifically about funding, so
Okay,
thank
Okay.
you.
sure. Okay, so that's 3 items.
Stephanie, I have one for Kristen. She mentioned that TA began collecting section 504 or data about students that have a section 504 agreement in place. I was wondering if she could provide a high-level view of how that data compares to students in special education, just on percentage, and if there's a breakdown by disability type, like the special education data that she had. So
Okay, so a high level overview of the breakdown of the 504 data.
right, as it relates, and then with a comparison to the percentages and numbers that are in special education. I'm just trying to get an overall sense of students with disabilities in that are enrolled, and how that compares to special education numbers and percentages.
Okay, sure. Okay. All right, got that. So 4 items. Okay. Anything else you'd like on your agenda?
What was the third item? I missed that one.
Oh, sorry. It's going to be SPED funding. Any specific information about SPED funding?
Thank you.
Sure. Okay. And I just would like to add that I know I sent everybody an email, and I sent a little snippet of the bylaws about attendance. So just as a reminder, if you know you're not going to be able to make the meeting according to the bylaws 24 hours before the meeting, if you could email me at the CAC email that I provided, and also Amy, that would be super helpful. Today we were able to have quorum. We already knew we were going to have 2 people out, but super helpful, just so that we can be respectful of everybody's time. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Stephanie, Zarin, I don't know if this is an agenda item for the next meeting or not, but I think we're at 14 members out of our 17.
Yep.
That's in statute. I'm wondering if the appointments office is working on filling those vacancies as we speak or not.
Yeah, what I can do is I can touch base with the office of the governor and my point of contact there, and see where we are in that, if there's active, like, are they actively trying to fill those? So I can give you an update on that. Sure, we can put that as an agenda item, and that would be assigned to me.
Okay, and certainly for the rest of us, if you know good potential candidates for the committee, the appointments office is always looking for good folks to fill these types of roles, particularly in our case, individuals with disabilities.
Thanks, Erin. I think that's a really good point to make. And Stephanie, this is Agatha Thibodeau. I was also wondering if maybe you would be able to just send us the information that we could forward to some people that we thought might be good candidates for an appointment.
Well, I have the link to the application and it explains a little bit about it. I can send that if you want. I'd be happy to email that out.
That would be perfect. Thank you so much. That way we just all have it at hand and we can send it out to anyone we think might be interested.
Sure. Okay. Oh, thank you, Erin. You already dropped the link in there. You're super fast. Appreciate that. Yep, that's exactly what I was going to send you. So there you go. Perfect. Alrighty, so are we ready to have Claudia review the minutes? I think we are. I think we're ready for that. Okay, Miss Claudia, you're up.
Okay, well, thank you, everybody. And any recommendations that you guys have for me, please, I'm willing to learn. So we started the meeting at 9:03 with Amy calling the meeting to order. We had Amy and Stephanie welcome us. Christian McGuire, the Senior Director of Special Education Policy Programs and Reporting, spoke to us about data related to special education. They got that data from PEMS and have a lot of notes. I go all the way through like the letter V. Do I go through all the bills or do I go on to the next big person that spoke?
Go ahead, Agatha.
Oh, sorry, it took me a minute to Claudia, what we've done in the past is just share your screen. And then typically we just kind of, everybody looks at the notes, looks for any spelling errors and things like that. Everybody's pretty good at that. And that way you don't have to just call it all out. We'll just kind of read through it, scroll down, and then we'll approve from there.
All right. Okay, here we go. There's a whole lot of spelling errors. I didn't know I was going to be sharing my screen. Okay, here. Oh, are you seeing the screen that says item 1903, Amy called the meeting to order? No?
Yes, I'm
Yes, it's
seeing
coming
it. It's
through.
just tiny.
Okay.
Maybe if you zoom in a little bit
Yes.
more.
How's that?
Great, thanks.
Now, do I go through and read it or do I let you guys read it?
Typically, we just read it. There is a template that we've been using for the past 4 years or so.
I have that one and my plan was to take my notes and then drop them into the template that I have. So this is just me doing my brain dump throughout the meeting. And then I was going to do it in the other template that you sent me.
Okay.
When I turned it in. This one right here, right?
So Stephanie, how does that work? Would we approve the minutes here and then have them transferred over and approve them again, or just should we wait?
That's a great question. I was looking for Brittany. She's our attorney that usually is on here, but I don't see that she has joined us this morning. She had a conflict. I would think that reading over this and looking at the content would be great. But then what we could do is just put it on as an agenda item for next time to just look at it in the correct template and then finalize it then if everybody would like to do that. And just realizing this is just, you know, a new process for Claudia. So just giving her some time to figure out the best way to do this and how she's comfortable doing it. And it's an awesome task to have to do, right? So I think that may be the best way to do it. Unless anybody else has a suggestion, but I think we do have to see the final minutes because they do go on the TEA webpage. And we would need all eyes on that before we approve it.
And something that I noticed is on the template, I have times. I should have taken time of when each person started speaking. So if you can send me the recording, that way I can jot down the times. Because on my notes that I'm sharing, I don't have, the only time that I have is Amy calling the meeting to order, but I don't have when Kristen started speaking or when Kyla started speaking.
Okay, the recording will be available on the TEA webpage once it is published, but I made myself a note to send that to you as well.
Okay.
But everybody has access to that recording, but I will send it to you, Claudia, once I see that it has been posted.
Okay.
One thing that I did notice between E and F, you have specific learning disabilities. I don't know if you were going to add something else to F or if that was a continuation of E, or is it just simply duplicative?
Yes, let me delete that one.
Agatha, a question for you is when people shared like slide decks, did you embed those in the minutes?
I typically just if they offered a link, I would just I would put a link in or you know, something like that, and then like Claudia captured very specific things, and just knowing that you can do just an overview. You can get granular, but it gets hard to capture all the granular stuff. But I mean, you did awesome.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
I
now
might
that I'm
suggest-
looking over here at Kristen's, it was like one sentence. She updated on certain things. I was like, oh, okay, I could have just done that. But
I might
yeah.
suggest for F through I, Foxtrot through India, just to mention that there was data related to the number of students with dyslexia, and especially if we can refer to the presentation. I think the numbers there are kind of, I think, because there was some nuance to that one on how it was presented, specifically switching in, I think it was 2018-19, where it went from dyslexia with 504, like the whole category changed. So it just may be clear to anybody reading the notes that that there was that data presented. If they want to see the details, if we can get a link to that presentation or embed that presentation or something, I think that would be probably better for folks.
Okay. I'm making a note here for myself. Well, I'll just make it over here. So what I have here, just kind of do a summary of it, like a 1 or 2 sentence summary, so that I don't have to put all of those bullets. And then would I add a link to her presentation on the minutes?
Yeah, that's what I've done in the past. Like if you look
Okay.
at the once you get a chance to sit down and look at the template, I mean, typically that's what I would do. I'd kind of get the time that the person presented, their title, they were with TEA, just a couple sentence summary of what it was, any links or that come up in the comments or anything that Stephanie or someone from TEA provides. And then, just so people know what was presented in our meetings. Like,
Okay.
Just the public knowing, because like the bulleted points, that's great for us knowing what the presentation was about. But the public will
not
be
for the
like, I
official.
don't know what that means. So we
Okay.
just are kind of telling them like, this is what was presented, sped information, numbers on blah, blah, blah.
Okay, got it.
It also might be good to talk about if we're asking them to come back because we had a specific question they had to answer later, what we're asking them to come back about in case the public wants to come to the next meeting to hear that.
Yes, yeah, that's true, Amy. And that's usually captured under the like future topics and things like that.
Right.
Yes, I see that one down here. Okay. All right, so I'll take these, summarize them, and then put them in the format of that template that was shared. And then do I send them to you, Stephanie, so that we can have them ready for approval for the next meeting?
Actually, you don't need to do that. You can just keep it and share your screen when we come to the next meeting, and we'll do the same thing. We'll look at that, and then everybody will vote whether or not to accept it or not. So you really don't need to send it to me.
All right.
Were there any links that you wanted to grab before this meeting is over to embed in here, like the links that Kristen dropped in there?
I believe I have the links.
Oh, perfect. Okay, perfect. Awesome. And also, for Kyla, she may send me her PowerPoint, and if she does, I'll send that to you, and you can put that in there as well.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else have any tips, pointers, suggestions? You did a great job, Claudia. I could not do what you did. It's just
I should have stuck to the template. Big topics.
Well, I know you want to capture everything. You don't want to miss anything. I totally get that. But think understanding the purpose being that it's, it goes up on TEA's webpage. It's just for the public to get an idea of because it's an open meeting, if you didn't attend, this is what we talked about. So it doesn't have to be so granular.
Okay.
Yeah, that's all I was going to say about that. So we
All
could
right.
just put on the next agenda that we will come back and review the minutes from today's meeting. Okay.
All right. And I cannot find my taskbar to stop sharing. So sorry about that.
Oh, let me see if I can help you out with that. Hang on. There you go. Gotcha.
Thank you.
Sure. No problem. Anybody else have anything else they want to discuss before we adjourn? Oh, good. I can wait. You've been a very quiet group this morning. I'll have to say that. Usually you guys are very chatty. Okay, Amy, do you want to adjourn the meeting?
If there is nothing else, I move to adjourn the meeting at 10:11 a.m. Can I get a second? Joanne is seconding our motion to adjourn. And I will see all of you on September 11th.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time and participation.